Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Welcome back to Season 3, Episode 2 of the Thermostat Podcast. 2020 has been crazy, continues to be crazy time in our world. Global pandemic, civil unrest, political and economic challenges. It's been a strange, disorienting time. So thanks for wherever you're listening and tuning in. I'm glad that you're with us. These are historical times. But I'm excited about the messages, the conversations, the nuggets of thought-provoking stuff that's coming along Season 3 that hopefully will continue to add value to your journey of your own life and how you're navigating your way through all of this personally, but then also with the team and the organization for your career, the people that you serve. As always, I hope these podcasts continue to give you something to think about each week, to engage your mind and heart, and to lead to intentional action. So thank you for everybody out there who continues to listen in and rate and review and share these so these messages can continue to be amplified and spread further in the world. On the last podcast, I discussed the difference between a journey and a trip and made the connection that all of us as individuals and in teams and organizations, we're realizing in the midst of the world that we're in right now, we're realizing with this global pandemic and everywhere we've been recently, everything that's been happening around us, we're realizing that everything that we're experiencing in the world is a journey and not a trip. That this isn't just an isolated experience. It's not a one and done. Hopefully we're going to move through this and get past this, but it's not about an isolated trip. Many people thought that when we started this in March, that everything was going to be wrapped up and finished by July. And what's been settling in with many people is the realization that this isn't just a trip. This is actually a journey that we're on. And this isn't a sprint, this is a marathon. So the way that we're going to continue to move throughout this journey is we need to listen, we need to learn, but we also need to move forward, one step at a time and together. So one of the great realizations lately after the initial charge with the pandemic and certainly everything that's been happening in the world with Black Lives Matter and the civil unrest and all that's happening around us is that all of us have been on hyperdrive. We've been maxing out our emotional, our physical, our spiritual bandwidth. And again, in many cases for good reasons and trying to come together and lead change and then to come together and find protocols and fight a virus that we can't see. And so for a lot of reasons, from March all the way through July and into August, many people have been running so fast and so quickly and have been on this hyperdrive and have been maxed out emotionally, physically, and spiritually. We've been running hot and we've been seeking immediate action and solutions, which rightfully so, of course we are. We're trying to find actions and solutions that actually move us forward. And we should continue to seek solutions and seek progress. But we also need to remember that we're on a journey and not just a trip. It's a marathon and not a sprint. And we need to make sure that we as individuals, but also as leaders and as teams and organizations, we need to make sure that we don't burn ourselves out, that we don't burn our teams out, our organizations out, those around us. We need each other, the best of each other, not just each other, but we need each other. We need the best of each other. in order to find solutions and make the progress that we seek. So, something that I've been consulting and working with teams and organizations in the last few months, something I've been talking about is we need to make sure, again, we can't tire. We can't give up. We have to continue to move forward and find solution and progress for everything that we're working on in our organizations and in the world. But we need to make sure that we don't burn ourselves out. We need to make sure that we are finding ways to recommit, refocus, and re-engage ourselves. So something, again, I've been consulting and encouraging my leaders, the teams and organizations that I work with, to think about lately is when are they going to rest? When are they going to rest? And I know when I ask that question, many people look at me as if I can't possibly rest. When can I take time to rest? Now is not the time to rest. And yet what happens is we begin to have a great conversation about what it means to rest. Because rest isn't just about then ignoring the things that we need to change or the path that we're on. It's not giving up. It's not moving backwards. In fact, we need to change our association with what the word rest even means. Because in its best sense, when we allow ourselves, when we know we're on a journey and not just a trip, we know we're on a marathon and not just a sprint, the best leaders, teams, and organizations, the best humans realize that we need to power down every once in a while. We need to unplug. We need to reboot our system so that we have the energy and the clarity of mind and heart for the long haul that we're on. The progress and the solutions and the future that we're trying to create that isn't all going to happen in one day, but it's going to be a part of many days and a future and a longer haul journey to come. But there's this myth that we all live with. This myth that the faster I run, the further I get. The faster I run, the further I get. We buy into this personally, but we also buy into this within our teams and organizations. Many organizations, the culture they have is just run faster, 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 faster. And in fact, we honor this term busyness, as you've heard me talk about in the past. And we also we honor this idea that if I'm the hardest working person in the world, that means I never stop, I never tire, and I just keep going. And yet, all of the research tells us otherwise, that we can actually be more effective. We can actually be better at what we do. We actually can be more productive and are more likely to find solutions when we're not just running faster, 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 but we're actually taking time to rest, to power down, to unplug, to reboot, to allow our minds and hearts to have clarity so that then we're more clear on what are the next actions we need to take. So if the myth is the faster I run, the further I get, the truth actually is rest plus clarity plus actions equals better performance. Rest plus clarity plus, yes, actions. We got to work hard, of course. But those three things together, rest, clarity, and actions, equals better performance. Did you know that Americans last year left a record 768 million days of vacation on the table? 768 million days of vacation on the table, unused. That's nearly $66 billion of lost benefits. Lost benefits for employees, for people in the world. And oftentimes the reason this is, there are many reasons, but often people are afraid to take time off. And we also honor this idea that we're going to outwork the competition, which means the faster I run, the further I get. And we continue to perpetuate and buy into this myth. But as you study the best, the most effective leaders, humans, creatives, teams, organizations in the world, they operate differently. Which doesn't mean that they don't work hard, doesn't mean that they don't hustle, doesn't mean that they don't, do everything they can to advance their mission. But if you really peel back the onion and look at them, they operate differently. Many people are familiar with what has become popular. Malcolm Gladwell is the one who I think made this popular. But the idea of the research, he wasn't the one that did the research, but research from years ago that said that in order to become an expert in whatever it is you do, that you need to have 10,000 hours of practice, of deliberate practice in order to become an expert. And so many teams and organizations have used that research to talk about the 10,000 hours, because if we want to become experts in what we do, in our craft, in our business, in the service we provide, then we need to dive in and develop and practice and get that 10,000 hours of practice. But there's something missing from that research. Because as you dig deeper into the research and you see that from that very same study, it actually reveals to us more information about world-class performance that isn't just about the 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. That is a part of it, and he's absolutely right that it requires, in order to become an expert at what you do, an expert in the craft of whatever you do, it does require what seems to be 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. But what often gets left out of that research, in the same study, it also showed that in addition to that 10,000 hours of deliberate practice, the most effective, elite performing, world-class performers also require 12,500 hours of deliberate rest. Deliberate rest. Times throughout their day, their weeks, their months, their years, where they are deliberately allowing their bodies, their minds, their hearts to rest, to reboot, to refocus, and then also 30,000 hours of sleep. And the study, cites all kinds of famous leaders in history. Leaders in history, all names that we all would recognize. Some of the most creative and innovative leaders in history, that part of their practice was daily, monthly, and yearly practice of making sure they build in deliberate rest into their work ethic so that they actually were better and more effective and more creative and clear on the next actions they needed to take. It talks about, the daily practice that so many of the most creative and historic leaders in the world take micro naps, and studies have shown that 20 minutes a day, a lot of times in that early afternoon slot, 20 minutes a day, that the practice and the intentionality of deliberate rest, of laying down and closing your eyes and allowing your brain to reboot as if it's a computer, has actually helped people be more creative. The power of walks, the power of early morning routines and reading and thinking. It talks about, which has become famous, but Bill Gates, his famous Think Weeks, where he has 1 or 2 weeks a year that he builds into his schedule, deliberate rest, where he goes off into a cabin by himself and he just reads, he thinks. He allows his brain to get out of the routines and think and just have space to deliberately rest and think. It talks about the power of sabbaticals, and that some of the most creative and historic leaders in the world have also taken advantage of sabbaticals, extended time away to allow themselves to reboot, to re-engage their energy. And so if anyone who has thinking in their job description, anyone out there in the world that thinking is a part of their job description, then we must take into account that our own biorhythm, every single one of us as humans, as leaders, we all have a slightly different biorhythm. Some people are night people, some people are morning people. But everybody has their own rhythm throughout the way they move and operate most effectively throughout a day. And the best leaders, teams, and organizations take that into account and realize that their biorhythm, how they take care of their energy, utilize their energy at its highest point, and also deliberately rest, are the ones that actually are world-class, elite, higher performing people's teams and organizations. For me personally, I have not only studied this, but I've also practiced this and realized this for many years now. Even before I realized what I was doing, I was, realizing how important this was for my own personal biorhythm, that the power of shutting my mind down for sleep, for vacation, for sabbatical, for thinking, and retreats to write and to think became just a part of what I do. But the reality is that I have now built into my deliberate practice of trying to make sure that I reboot myself almost daily with that 20-minute close my eyes, allow my brain to just shut down for 20 minutes. I even set a little timer and then it wakes me back up. And sometimes I don't even fall asleep, but it just allows my brain to go into a different mode of thinking. And amazing how rejuvenated I feel coming out of that. From the power of making sure that I'm not only taking vacation, time and space away with loved ones, or time to just rest and be engaged with something outside of work, but specific sabbaticals, times to think, to explore, to read, and to develop. From that time and that sabbatical away, clarity has risen to the surface, and without a doubt, it's made me better at everything that I do. As a person, as a husband, as a father, and absolutely with the work, the content I'm creating in the world, and certainly the support that I'm giving to teams and organizations of helping them develop as I take care of myself. That 10,000 hours of practice plus 12,500 hours of deliberate rest and 30,000 hours of sleep makes me perform at a higher level than is possible if I buy into the myth of the faster I run, the further I get. If you're familiar with the Wallace four-stage of the creative process developed back in 1926, the Wallace four-stage of creative process, it talks about the four stages of the creative process for us all. It starts with one, preparation. The stage of just preparing ourselves and allowing space to prepare for whatever it is that we're doing or thinking about. Stage two of that creative process is incubation, which means we need time to step back and let ideas marinate, to go through that incubation process. Then stage three is illumination, when finally the idea or the clarity starts to come and we say, all right, now we understand where the actions are, and we begin to go to work. And then stage four of the creative process is verification. We have to test out the idea. We have to begin to see if it's connecting and if it's actually having the impact that we think it will have. Most creative thinkers, teams, or organizations, they realize that they are at their best when they allow time and space. They realize it is part of world-class performance. It's not an extra. It's not an add-on, something we do after just to recover. They realize that this deliberate process and resting throughout is part of what makes them world-class performers. The book Rest, if you haven't heard of the book Rest, Why You Get More Done When You Work Less, it's a book that really lays all of this out, and it gives us the science behind, but also examples throughout history of leaders and organizations that really adopted this idea that we can, when we deliberately rest and deliberately practice, we will be better at what we do. But there's an excerpt from that book that talks about the world that we're in right now that I think is worth sharing with you right now. It says, as we move into a world and economy that seems to defy the constraints of geography and time, that operates globally and 24/7, we feel the need or pressure to work continuously, to ignore our body's clocks and push on, push on and vent when our bodies are pleading to rest. But this is a mistake. In the world that never stops and 24/7 global world that we're in right now, and certainly with the pressures that are happening in the world right now, we think that we just need to push on and ignore our body clocks and ignore what our bodies are pleading for us. But the reality is, we will be better when we actually step back, deliberately rest, allow our minds and our hearts to reboot, to shut down, and more clarity and better performance will come because of it. Our world-class performance, or however you rate, or whatever you're aiming for your own performance in your life or work, however you define that, is directly tied to our ability to deliberately practice plus deliberately rest in order to think, grow, and evolve our lives and work. That's where our best performance lives. So as always, here are some questions to ponder for you, for your own life and your own career. How do you manage your energy? How do you manage your energy weekly, daily, monthly, throughout a year? How do you manage your energy, and when do you deliberately rest? How do you need to plan time to prepare, that 4 stages of the creative process, to prepare incubation, illumination, and verification for your creative process? Remember, life doesn't stop, but we are able to bring our best energy to it when we not only deliberately practice, but deliberately rest. Thank you for listening to today's podcast, and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.